Joining us now, Bob Dane. He's the executive director of FAIR. What is FAIR, you say? Well, that's one of my favorite organizations in the world. They are fighting for Americans every day. Bob Dane, good to have you with us.
Fighting just like you, John, for good common sense. Looks like that might be on the horizon right now.
Oh, well, it might be. We're trying to fight every day. Got these riots and protests going on. Let's start with President Trump's executive order the other day. All the Democrats, the liberals, the left, the media calling it a Muslim ban, which I find to be ludicrous because 47 countries with a majority of Muslims, including countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., not included in the ban, and the Trump team basically saying these are the 7 countries that have the highest propensity to simply harbor and export terrorists into the United States. The same 7 countries that Barack Obama said were the worst offenders. What's the deal here?
Yeah, look, the order doesn't even mention the word Muslim, and it represents only a small number of countries. The focus is not on the religion, but on the risk factors of those states. States that are hotspots for terrorism, states that don't cooperate with our immigration standards, let alone any international standard, or more importantly, countries who have no record-keeping infrastructure in place that makes it impossible for us or anyone to determine who's who. Look, this is an irrational overreaction to a temporary ban so that we can get our house in order. I mean, you can't fix the leak in the bathtub while the water is still running. Shut off the water. Get the plumber in here. This media frenzy is a function, I think, John, of course, their hatred for Donald Trump, of course, but I think it more broadly demonstrates that the left and the media, although I repeat myself, will never agree to limits or controls on immigration, even a temporary one. Let's put this in perspective. John, we had 1.5 million immigrants every year. You got 12 million illegal aliens already here. You got 900,000 foreign guest workers here. Overall, 80 million come in and out of the country every year, and for almost a decade we've had open borders and ratcheting down of enforcement while international terrorism is rising. Gosh, is it really that much to ask that we take a few months' time off to do a little routine maintenance on the admission process that represents the biggest threat, but in reality really affects a minuscule amount of people? I mean, if we can't do that, if we can't just take the car into the garage and get under the hood and do some tune-up every now and then, we might as well just give up on this American enterprise.
Bob, what is driving the hysteria here on the left?
For 8 years, the far left has been getting increasingly intoxicated with their power, and they had plenty of it for the last 8 years. And like all drunks, they're belligerent and irrational. The real question here, John, it really is whether their radical goal of transforming America transcends any respect they have for the free election, which we just had, and the orderly power of the orderly transfer of power. They are dug in on the open borders issue and the idea of not enforcing the law. This is a real problem, John, thanks to Obama, because Obama pushed the narrative for 8 years that simply violating immigration laws in and of themselves is now apparently entirely inconsequential. That was probably his most diabolical trick, to reprogram people into thinking that violating immigration laws, unless you're a violent felon or a national terrorist threat, doesn't matter. But even in that regard, we watched last year 30,000 criminal aliens released back out onto the street. So for a lot of young people, especially young folks, the idea of actually removing someone from the country for breaking their immigration laws is horrifying. That's, I think, what we're fighting.
I think the caveat to this whole thing, the linchpin for the left, is the clip I played several times today where Democratic junior senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy, basically tipped their hand. He said, look, I'm in favor, he said we actually are in favor of anybody being able to come into the United States that wants to come in without being vetted. They should just be allowed to come in. Basically, this is the cry, the plea of the open borders crowd. Come one, come all, anytime, anybody, come on in. And he said, we don't have to vet them, but what we do have to do is make sure they don't get an assault weapon. Well, they're gunning us down with trucks. I mean, it's an absurd argument, but I thought that clip of Chris Murphy gave insight into what the real agenda is. which is just keep the borders open, get the slave trade network in, get the cheap labor in. This is an unholy alliance. I've said this over and over and over, by Republicans whose campaigns are funded by the cheap slave trade labor network, international globalist crowd that keeps their dollars flowing in so they can depress wages, and the Democrats who are just looking for votes. And so who suffers? The American worker. I mean, this is absurd beyond belief to say that we just should open the borders up and let anybody in. And then the only restriction we have is you can't buy an assault weapon. Yet somebody in Minnesota going to a mall trying to chop heads off with a kitchen knife. What the hell are they talking about?
The open borders groups, the Dems, the mainstream media, yes, they're going bananas. But let's keep this in mind. What we're watching is the theater of a very small but vocal number of people. Remember, the silent majority said no to immigration for votes. They said no to immigration for cheap labor, and they said no to the globalization is good for the middle class lie. And that silent majority elected a new president. He made promises, and the president is delivering on that. Here's something to keep in mind. While all of these executive orders seem dramatic, we've had a lot of them in a very short period of time, and your head can start spinning. But keep in mind, all the president is doing here is fixing a lot of what Obama dismantled. Trump is adjusting our immigration policies back to where they adhere to the law. Obama did far more dramatic things, John, but he got away with it because it was done covertly over 8 years, slowly and steadily, that, death of 1,000 cuts, nobody noticed.
Right.
And nobody noticed. Why? Because the mainstream media gave him cover.
That is exactly it. Let's go to the wall. A lot of hand-wringing over that. I don't have any doubt that Trump is going to find a way. But what is the problem with having the wall? It worked in Israel, right?
There's no problem with having the wall. The wall, at the very least, is a physical, visible, tangible symbol of America's sovereignty. All countries have the right and the responsibility to maintain sovereignty and determine who and under what terms people come in. And this distraction of who's going to pay for the wall, I don't know. I can't get inside the head of Donald Trump's bargaining status. But look, even if Mexico doesn't pay for the fence, let's go ahead and get it built. Because given that illegal immigration cost us $113 billion a year, building the fence is a pretty good investment. Look, it would be great if Mexico paid, or Canada, or even the Swiss. But at the end of the day, the American public is happy to foot the bill. We've said so time and again, and we said so loudly in 2006 when we pressured Congress to enact the Secure Fence Act. We told them, we need the fence, and they didn't build it. Let's just do it.
I think it's time to have it done. There's no question about it. And look, you can debate how effective it's going to be. It was certainly effective in Israel. There's no question. But it's also a symbol, and the symbol says, we're going to change our policy, no more open borders. And as President Trump has said for 3 decades, if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. And I mean, that's simple for people to understand. You have to come in legally. The laws are already there, right? It's not like we have to change anything.
Yeah, like the weakest part of the immigration crisis isn't the fence. It's been a wobbly will in Washington to enforce the law. But look, let's put this in perspective. Almost 10 years ago, at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, they launched a sophisticated spacecraft. It traveled 3 billion miles from here to Pluto, where it is now, interestingly, transmitting some high-resolution close-up photos today. And yet, in that same 10 years since the Secure Fence Act was enacted, which called for the low-tech construction of, a fence that's simply brick, mortar, wire, and wood, only 36 miles of it has been built. I say that only to illustrate that this is a matter of our will. It's not a matter of capability.
All right, Bob, we're almost out of time. Bob Dane, final question. Jeff Sessions coming up today. Confirmation, is he going to pass?
Yep.
I like that answer. We're out of time. I want to thank Bob Dane for being with us. Succinct and salient answer. One word. Yes.
Very rare in Washington, but you can bank the family farm on that one.
All right, I like that. We want to thank Bob Dane for being with us, Executive Director of FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And Bob Dane's been fighting this battle with me for a very long time. So, Bob, we thank you for all you guys do. We're out of time. Thanks for being with us.